everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's Talks at Google, featuring Tricia McGrath and Lida Citroën's talk on her book, Success After Service, as part of Google VetNet's week-long programming for Veterans Day. To introduce myself, my name is Charlene Clee, and I'm Google's Veteran Hiring Initiatives Program Manager for Staffing. And I'm excited to be here today to kick us off to talk about Google's approach to hiring veterans, as well as provide some career resources for the veteran community. Now, first and foremost, I'd like to start off today, the day before Veterans Day here in the United States, thanking each and every one of our service members who is currently viewing this talk. We recognize that the same skill sets and experiences that you gained during your time in the military are exactly what makes so many veterans great Googlers. Whether it's your strong sense of teamwork, your leadership skills, your ability to handle complex situations under pressure, your commitment to serving communities around the world, we recognize the culture and value add of the veteran community. So with that said, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And when we say that we want to build for everyone, we really do mean everyone. And in order to do that, we need a workforce that's representative of the users that we serve. And of course, that includes veterans. So in my role, I work across various teams and people operations to increase Google's accessibility, equity, and inclusion for veterans engaging in our hiring process. And with that, I partner very closely with our employee resource group, VetNet, on many of these initiatives. So how do we approach veteran hiring? We have a three-pronged approach here. In this first one, internal education, this is where we're really focused on upskilling Googlers in their knowledge of the military experience, from translating a military resume to providing candidate preparation resources for veterans that may be engaging in our hiring process and more. The second piece of it, external education, is where we provide the veteran community with different career prep resources and job-seeking tools. So this could be just information on how to apply or what our interview process looks like. It could also look like some tips and tricks for how to translate a military resume for non-military jobs. It can also just look like how to just generally prepare for the interview and more. And the last piece of it, talent engagement, is really where we're engaging veteran talent throughout the hiring process and beyond. So this could be from active or passive pathways. So what I mean by actives are external partnerships, programs, conferences, and events, whether we're partnering with those external partnerships to hold them or whether we're hosting them here at Google. And then passive, such as when someone applies online, LinkedIn reach outs, and things like that. So next up, you've heard a little bit about how we approach veteran hiring at Google, so I wanted to make sure that I share some resources with you for the veteran community. Now first here, we have our Google Veterans Careers page, and on this site, you'll find information about the veteran community at Google, a spotlight on several featured Googlers, and various career resources. Next up, we have Google's Veteran Career Series. So this is a 5-part series that covers Google culture, job opportunities, and more. We kick off first with a fireside chat with Google veterans. Then there's a series of lightning talks given by Google veterans working in technical roles. And then that same thing of a series of lightning talks delivered by Google veterans who work in business roles. And we round things out with a session on building your civilian brand and a live Q&A. Next, we have Grow with Google. So Grow with Google's mission is to create economic opportunity for Americans. So as part of their remit, they've created a bunch of really wonderful tools and resources designed to help transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses prepare for and build meaningful careers. And last but certainly not least, I'm really excited to share that we have our Life at Google Military Community YouTube playlist. So this playlist is comprised of 7 videos, which highlight the stories of Googlers who have served, are serving, or who are the spouse of someone who served and who made their career journey to Google. All of these videos will be hosted on our Life at Google YouTube channel, and they'll be going live tomorrow in honor of Veterans Day. And with that, it's now time to hear from our wonderful featured speakers of the hour. So I'll be passing things over to them in a moment and hopping off. But we have with us Lida Citroën, who is here today to discuss her book, Success After Service, How to Take Control of Your Job Search and Career After Military Duty. She shares how veterans can have successful career transitions and provides strategies for long-term career growth, such as getting promoted, building a network that works, and living your values. An ally passionate about serving veterans, Lida is a personal branding expert and military transition specialist. A TEDx speaker, author, and coach, Lida has spent 10 plus years helping transitioning service members and veterans secure meaningful and rewarding post-military careers. So welcome back, Lida. We're excited to have you here today. And moderating this talk is our very own Tricia McGrath Hess. She's a recruiter at Google, our VetNet New York lead, and she's married to a retired Army colonel and fellow Googler. So take it away, Lida and Tricia.
Hi, thank you so much, Charlene. Honestly, lovely introduction, but also thank you so much for the work that you do for veterans here at Google. It's so amazing what you've accomplished in the last few years. So thank you so much for that. Lida, I'm thrilled to have you here. Let me just say, I was introduced to Lida a couple of years ago now by Student Veterans of America that we get to work with through VetNet. And lead VetNet New York. And so we work a little bit with the SVA folks, and they actually told me there was someone that I had to meet, and her name was Lida. And that is how we started engaging on this. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. What a blast. We get to have a conversation about our favorite topic.
It is our favorite topic. We talk about it a lot, but I have to say, I read your book, Success After Service. I read the whole thing cover to cover, and I loved it. I loved so much about it. So I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you today about it.
Thank you.
Lida, let's kick it off, because I'd like to know how you started working with the military community and the genesis for writing this book. I'd love to hear those things.
Sure. And thank you. And as Charlene said, to those watching who are prior military or have family members like yourself, Tricia, who have served, first off, thank you. We get to enjoy the freedoms and liberties of being an American because of the service and sacrifice of those who have worn the uniform and made it possible. So before I say anything, I want to make sure I say thank you as well. You know, I don't have a military connection in this country. My parents are immigrants and came to this country, both teaching my brother and I at a young age that, you know, freedom doesn't come for free. And if you ever get a chance to say thank you, make sure you do. But that really didn't register proactively for me until 2009, actually November 9, 2009, when I was taught that what I get to do for a living is something that's not communicated in the military conversation. And what I mean by that is my day job is helping executives and professionals, entrepreneurs, and global business leaders build this thing called a personal brand, manage their reputation, and yes, in some cases, repair their reputation. But nobody was having that kind of a conversation with the men and women that were taking the uniform off. And so I thought, well, here's an opportunity where I can say thank you for your service and do something about it. I didn't realize at the time how hard that was going to be. Military and post-military is a very insulated community. And I went around knocking on doors and said, hey, I've got this coaching work that I do, and I teach this program. I think veterans would benefit. And a lot of people were skeptical. What was in it for me? Why would I volunteer to do this? And it took a long time to get those doors open. But once I did, I was hooked. And I realized there was a lot I didn't know as a civilian. My base of knowledge really came from movies and television. I thought that's what the military experience was. But in working now with thousands, probably tens of thousands of transitioning service members, military spouses, advocates of the military experience, writing and coaching and speaking, I've learned that there is so much more to the transition, and being able to tell your own story, being able to be proactive about what narrative the employer will have of your skills and experience and what you can contribute is so powerful. And I'm so honored that I get to be part of bringing that message to the men and women who've worn our nation's cloth.
That is fantastic. Well, you know that I came to the military only 6.5 years ago. So I'm sort of a latecomer to this world as well. So I'm learning as I go along. So I really appreciate that story. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about, here at Google, we have a number of veterans. Oftentimes they're even asked to help. They're asked to help active duty folks with their military, with their search, their career transition. Mm-hmm. And so when a service member begins the search for that first job coming out of the service, when they're just getting ready to either retire or to separate, What are some of the first things you tell people they should know?
I think first and fundamentally, there's a difference in how we talk about ourselves, right? Meaning somebody from the military culture and community and somebody from the civilian. And those cultures could not be more different, right? So we know that the military recruits civilians just like a civilian employer would. But once somebody has spent 4 or 44 years in the military culture, they come out of that experience with some differences. And first is how we talk about ourselves. So Tricia, you know, I have no trouble talking about my experience, my skills. I can read my resume frontwards and backwards, right? Because civilians we learn that. We learn how to self-agency. We learn how to self-promote and self-market. But somebody coming from a military community, especially where the culture of service before self is so heavily promoted, which is amazing and wonderful. Service before self means it's not about you. It's about you take responsibility and accountability, but you don't take credit and accolades for the work that you do in the military. And it's wonderful. I mean, I love that value set. The challenge is when you take off the uniform, now you're in front of a civilian hiring manager or professor or investor who says, sell me on you. And that individual is going to use the collective. They're going to say, when I was in uniform, or my platoon did this, my unit did this. And that other person doesn't understand. Why aren't you using first person? Why aren't you talking about yourself? Aren't you proud of what you did? Are you insecure? Are you unsure? There's this disconnect in how we talk about ourselves. And when I speak to the veteran community, my goal isn't to teach them how to be, boastful and arrogant, but it is, how do you bring your experiences forward to create a value proposition of who you are today and what you can offer in the future? And that does mean using first person on LinkedIn, in conversation, in a resume, in a cover letter, in how you network. You have to be able to talk about yourself. The other thing that I noticed about the military culture that shows up in transition is this idea of choice. Right? Tricia, you and I love choice, because choice to us is power, right? We want to choose the jobs we pursue. We want to choose the people that we associate with. We want to choose how we look and what we dress like. But the military isn't typically a very choice heavy environment, right? There's a lot of processes and protocols and standards. So choice is very different. Every month I volunteer to teach at the United States Air Force Academy transition program. And every month, right before I take the stage and I teach these transitioning airmen, they have just done a group exercise that has been so revealing, because every month the exercise is they list out, what are they most excited about in transitioning? What are they most anxious about in transitioning? And for 6 years now, I've taken a photo of that list they make every month, because on the same side is the same concept. What are you most excited about? I get to choose what I wear. I get to choose what kind of work I do. I can choose what time I get up in the morning. What are you most anxious about? I don't know what to do. What do I wear? And what time do you need me to get up? Right? So it's choice. We say to these men and women, thank you for your service. The world is at your disposal. They're going to, throw themselves at you. Go have fun. And they don't know where to start. So the concept of choice can be paralyzing. And in this book, that was so much of what I tried to walk a reader through is, here are some things you should do first. Here are some things you could do second. Start planning this as if it was a military structure, but now it's all about you. So the idea of self-promotion, the idea of choice go hand in hand. And success after service really is that roadmap to show somebody how to navigate those conversations.
I love that you mentioned that in the book. You did take us through that story about how you go in and you see what folks are happy about and what they're afraid of. And I would say my husband, when he joined Google and they told him he could wear, of course, whatever he wanted, he's like, well, what if I want to wear a uniform? I've been wearing it for 30 years. But no, that wasn't an option. So that's great. Tell me, I love that you discuss the path to employment. But you also highlight that many veterans pursue education and entrepreneurship after the military. You know, we actually talked a little bit about that. Charlene mentioned, and I know you know, that we have this whole Grow with Google program, which really does work with a lot of our entrepreneurs and veteran entrepreneurs. So, you know, what are unique challenges and opportunities that you see for student veterans or veteran entrepreneurs who are making that leap when they leave the service rather than going into sort of a regular conventional job search?
Well, and I think even just to start off, what is a regular conventional job search?
I know. I'm a recruiter. I have to say that, right?
But there's corporate, there's small business, there's nonprofit, there's government. And within all of those, there's nuances and intricacies. And I try to address those as much as I can. And the book probably skews a little bit more heavy to joining a traditional business environment. But there are those two other paths, right? And we know that so many transitioning service members take advantage of those amazing GI Bill resources that organizations like Student Veterans of America, who you mentioned, I am very passionate about. I participated with them for years. They're advocating for the kind of resources that veterans need to maybe complete a bachelor's degree or pursue higher education, and not, I don't like to say to use it as a deterrent, right? I don't know what I want to do, so I'll just get some more schooling. But oftentimes these career paths, especially right now, are focused on upskilling or reskilling. Somebody might want to do something completely different than what they did in the military, and getting some advanced education really helps them enter the industry sector at a higher level. So once you're on campus, you know, I think it's important to recognize that student veterans are non-traditional students. They might be 25 to 40, have families, and have had a career already. That doesn't compare to the one of the person sitting next to you who may be leaving home for the first time. That creates some different dynamics. What's amazing about student veterans, though, is that they tend to find each other. So the first thing I would say to do is find other veterans on campus. Right now, a lot of us are doing remote work. Find them in clubs, in activities, in communities, and have that shared experience on campus, regardless of whatever education you're pursuing, because that's a really strong connection to make. On the entrepreneur side, what's remarkable is that entrepreneurs that are veterans tend to have a very high success rate. We know that veterans who pursue self-ownership or self-business or small business afterwards do really well. And I wanted to just take 1 second and read something that was in the book about entrepreneurship. It says, we know that veterans are resilient and tenacious, critical factors in seeking a business grow, watching a business grow from inception to viability. Veterans also have demonstrated leadership qualities, great to have, but they're actually critical for an entrepreneur to promote and sell a business idea to investors. Business partners and entrepreneurs. We know that veterans bring strong work ethic, excellent problem-solving skills, and the patience to see a mission through to completion. These are valuable traits to enable a person to navigate the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. And there are plenty of highs and lows. But, you know, to want to start a business just because you don't want to work for someone else, that might be a more limiting belief. But if there is a dream of owning your own business and being your own boss and taking that invention or that idea or that franchise, which is really big in the veteran space, into practicality, that's where we see a lot of success. And we do address that in the book and talk about best practices and even share some examples and stories of, you know, I've had clients go on Shark Tank and they talk about that experience, what it's like to get that kind of endorsement at a very high level for entrepreneurship.
One thing you mentioned in the book was about the franchising. And I guess I'm one of those people who didn't realize that there are so many franchises in this country, in the world, but also that so few of them are food. You all just think someone's going to have a Taco Bell or something like that, but you did go into how many there are. That was very telling.
And there's incentives, through the Small Business
Right.
Administration. There's wonderful coaches and consultants out there, and some of them contributed to the book to share some of those resources, because there is a lot of independence that veterans
Right.
feel, and maybe they don't see quite how they line up with a corporate business or a nonprofit. They don't really see why they'd go back to school, and entrepreneurship makes sense. And there's also different paths, and that was important in the book. Is it's not linear, right? In the
Right.
military, career progression is somewhat predictable and more,
Right.
standardized. But maybe somebody works as an entrepreneur for a while and then realizes some advanced education would help, or they work in corporate for a while and then they get advanced degrees and then they go into entrepreneurship. All of those options are available, which kind of leads us back to choice.
Right. But I think that's hard, because when they're coming out, they want to commit to something and move forward with it. But as we know, and certainly you know from your own career, and I know from mine, I've had a number of careers, that it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always go on a straight line. So, and
to your point, I hear from veterans that I mentor or coach that they're concerned because it seems like the person to the right and the left of them already has a job lined up.
right.
I don't. We also know there's very high turnover in the first 1 to 3 years when somebody does leave the military and takes that first job.
Mhm.
And oftentimes they're doing it for the exact reason you mentioned, which is, I just want something.
Right.
Right. Now the spouse will calm down. We can locate the community. Okay, I got it. And then they realize maybe they chose something that was too far of a stretch or really wasn't aligned with their passion. So in the book, I talk about how to think through those options. Maybe it's not the first job that you get offered. Maybe it is important to hold out. Maybe it's important to take a little bit of a step back in terms of role and responsibility to be able to move forward faster. All of these are just choices they're not used to navigating.
Right. And that's why it's good that they have you and that they have your book. Okay. I want to move on to a different topic. One of a topic that is, as you know, near and dear to me. And this is networking. So I work with a lot of veterans outside of Google, and I always hear from them that networking is horrible. It's scary. And it's so important. And you mentioned this in the book. To get through a transition like this, you really need to do some networking. Tell me why, because I know you've talked to so many veterans. Tell me why this is such a hard concept for our veterans, and even the ones who are currently in the workforce, not the ones who are just coming out. But tell us about networking and how you get your veterans to accept this concept.
I think the key word is accept. I don't think they fully embrace, but they accept. And the first time they see how it works, then they're fully on board. Networking is not a dirty word. And as soon as I say the word in a conference setting or in a corporate setting, I see the eyes rolling. I see the hands crossing, and I get it. It feels like, kissing up or something that's really disingenuous. But networking is about relationship building. And I was so thrilled as I was doing all the research and the interviews for the book, how many people shared stories about, getting a job lead that wasn't even published through networking. One person shared how he had just started building relationships, conversations with people in the community he'd be relocating to after he left the Army. And one of the people he was conversing with said, you know what? I think I'm going to be leaving my position. I think you'd be perfect for it. This wasn't even a job where the job description had been written up yet. We hear stories like that all the time. It's relationship building. It has to be mutual benefit. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? If all you're doing is asking me to look at your online profiles or asking me to review your resume or asking me to introduce you to people, well, that's more sales than networking. But if there's a reciprocity, so you're sending thank you notes, you're making introductions, you're giving a shout out on social media to the people that are helping you, that's really all that they want. We don't need you to give us a job. I have a job. But there has to be reciprocity to networking. And it's not a bad thing. There are 4 people in networking that you want to be looking for. Obviously, you want to meet decision makers, right? Like people like Tricia, really good to have in your network because she can open doors and she has access to opportunities. We call those decision makers. But there's also influencers, people who, could give you a recommendation on LinkedIn or a shout out on social media or forward your resume on, and their word counts and they carry a lot of credibility. Those are really good people to know. But also information sources, and they may or may not ever be decision makers or influencers, but they know stuff, right? Maybe they're really good at branding or really good at social media or really good at how they dress and present themselves. Having those people in your network builds up your competitive advantage. And then the fourth people are cheerleaders. And again, these people may never be in any of the other categories, but cheerleaders are people who are just so supportive and encouraging and will endorse you and refer you and promote you and just make you happy. We need those people in our network too. And if you think about networking more strategically, rather than what can I get from that person, but how can they help me and how can I help them back? Now we can have a relationship, a professional relationship. And that's what gets people jobs. The percentage of people who get jobs through networking is off the charts, especially right now when everything shifted. That hiring manager or recruiter who, as you and I talked about, Tricia, you're looking at the minimum requirements, and then you're looking at preferred requirements when a job rec comes in. You're going out to the mass universe of people who have resumes, right? Who are flailing those resumes around. But if somebody walks up to you and says, Tricia, I know this person, they've got most of the skills, but man, they're us. They fit the Google culture. You're going to take a look at that resume and probably have a conversation and hopefully then put that resume forward. That's why networking matters.
We see that all the time here. We have a lot of our veterans, our members of VetNet, will send around emails to all of us saying, hey, I have this person. Can anyone talk to them? What are you thinking? So I think that the veteran community, they have some very strong networks. I think it's just a matter of you have to get people comfortable with getting into that. Let me ask you a follow-up on that. How do you get folks interested in social media? LinkedIn is to us king. As a recruiter, LinkedIn is like the be all and the end all. But I know a lot of people don't have it and they're uncomfortable with it. So how do you get people to do that?
Well, I say that, if you want to be found, then you're on social media. Okay. So if you have a career, I don't know, if you're a hitman, maybe you don't want to be found. So okay, stay off social media. All kidding aside, there are certain security clearances where social media would be a risk. And in those limited situations, perhaps it isn't a fit. But I think the biggest fear people have about being online is giving up privacy. And my answer to that is, if I want to find out about you, I can probably find out about you, whether you have a Facebook account or a LinkedIn profile. But the control, the amount of proactive control you have by being on social media outweighs the risk. It really does. Knowing we can find information about you if we want, then why not take control and put the information on a LinkedIn profile, for instance, that you want people to find about you. You want them to know that you went through West Point. You can put that on LinkedIn. You don't want them to know that? Don't put it on LinkedIn. I mean, it's very easy to control the information. You can control the people you're associated with. But if you don't have a strategy, it can feel very abstract and random. So have a strategy. Social media should serve a very specific purpose. Do you want to be found? Who do you want to be found by? For what things do you want to be found by? Right? My category generally is marketing. I don't want to be found for marketing opportunities. I want to be found for personal branding and reputation management with a set of 3 different audiences. I am very specific about the content I put online to speak the language and attract those audiences in the category that I want to be found in. That's often where our transitioning service members make a mistake. They just put their entire CV up on LinkedIn and wait for the phone to ring. They use an old picture or their wedding picture or a picture with their cat, and they don't understand that it really should be more specific than that. The keywords that go in your online profile should be the keywords that Tricia's going to look for when she's looking to hire that position. And that does mean a little bit of research on the front end, but the power and control you get through social media really does outweigh the risk, especially because you're not giving up control when you make yourself visible.
Right. And you mentioned that in the book, because and for those who don't know, Lida is a personal branding specialist. She has this whole military spin, but she's been doing personal branding. So you actually talk about that, the personal brand versus reputation, and how you can control that. Just tell us just a little bit about that, and then we'll move on. But I like this.
That's my favorite topic.
I know.
Personal brand is really, what you set out to be known by. And it starts with your values. And this is often a very interesting conversation when I ask a group of military veterans, what are your values? Because obviously I would hear things like commitment, honor, service, duty, right? The military values. But now, taking the uniform off, it becomes about your values as an individual. What do you believe in? Not what your parents taught you or your community or even your online influencers or politicians tell you you should value, but your values, because that builds your personal brand. Your values matched with action is where you get credibility. So I remind you that, when I first started working in the military, my values were perfectly clear. I saw this as a way that I could express gratitude for the service of the men and women who'd worn the uniform, and I could be generous in donating my services. But I had zero credibility because I hadn't done anything.
Right.
So it wasn't until I was, writing articles and then writing books and speaking and working with LinkedIn to build out their veteran program. And I did a TED talk, and all of these touch points showed that my action matched my value, where I got credibility. And building your brand really is about having the end state in mind, which is something veterans understand, right? What is the mission? What is the ideal end state? Well, when it comes to you, what do you want to be known for, right? What do you want people to feel when they see your name or they hear your name or you walk into a room? And when you're clear about that, that's way off into the future. You reverse engineer it by saying, okay, so how do I have to be today? What do I say yes to get to that point? What do I say no to? What feels good? What feels bad? And who are the people, the companies I want to align with because they believe the same thing I do? They want to achieve the same reputation ultimately and end state that I do, because then everything becomes easy. The marketing, how do you show up on social media? How do you dress? What kind of people should you know? That's the marketing. The branding is who are you? Why do you matter? And who needs to find you relevant and compelling? And that's the hard work. But when you do the hard work, the rest is easier.
Well, a little easier, but let's get to my world now. So as a recruiter, I review a lot of resumes. We also host, and I know that I've mentioned this to you, we host a veterans resume workshop here at Google every year as part of our Google Serve, which is the sort of the giving back that we do here as a company each year. So I've done a lot with veterans resumes, both in that and also just in my day job reviewing resumes for candidates. Tell us about the resume. Tell us what people should think about when they're starting their resume, how they should make it so someone like me and all of my colleagues, all of my corporate recruiting colleagues are going to be able to that it's going to resonate. How to get a resume to resonate with a recruiter.
That's a lot of R's.
I know, right? And I didn't even trip over them.
Well, Tricia, you and I've had the conversation. I'm not a fan of resumes for the reason that they look backwards, right? A resume is what you've done before. And if it's done correctly, then what you've done before leads up to why we're having the conversation. And that gives me an opportunity to talk about what I can contribute in the future. Brand is all about future. It's all about expectation of an experience and future. So it's natural that I wouldn't love the looking backwards. But where I think a lot of folks make the mistake, and this is veteran as well as a civilian, is we try to throw everything into the resume just in case it could catch somebody's eye. And the mistake with that, as you know, is a recruiter typically, if they're physically looking at a resume, is going to give it maybe 6 to 8 seconds, just scanning.
Right.
If it goes into an online application tracking system, those keywords are going to be searched for. And so putting everything in there can be overwhelming. And the military does have sort of a more attitude. I mean, I get emails from veterans that are like 5 pages long. And we know that brevity really is an art, and it helps. So when a resume is more focused, because that person has done the research to say, okay, who have I talked to at Google who has told me about what this position really is about? What have they told me about the culture? What have they told me about the recruiting process? Then you're tailoring a resume to specifically speak to that opportunity, going to that recruiter for that specific job. And it feels scary to take things out, but I always say leave something for the interview, right? So I'm not a fan of the word demilitarizing resumes.
Right.
I think that that has a misnomer. It doesn't mean swapping out words, because
Right.
it's kind of like translating any language. It can feel really choppy.
Right.
But it's about taking the experience somebody had and saying, here's how it makes sense for the position you're recruiting for. It may not be literal, right? I might not meet all those minimum requirements in terms of years of direct experience,
Right.
but here's how what I've done translates into what you're looking for. And here's where I can help you take that forward. That's when you're making the recruiter's job easier. And it does mean a lot more work on the resume writer's standpoint. We also see a challenge when folks will have somebody else write their resume. And oftentimes that's a great solution if this is overwhelming. Just make sure that when you get that resume back, that you can speak to it. Because someone like Tricia is going to ask you about all that experience that's listed in the way it's listed. And if you don't know what she's talking about, that's going to be an uncomfortable interview.
It is. And then no one's going to believe you that that was your resume. It's a sales document. I think people need to accept that. And we have our veterans are very humble, as you know, and so they're not often comfortable with that.
Right.
Let's take it to the other side. So a job search is two-sided, of course. It has the candidates and it has the folks who are hiring them. What kind of advice would you give to my fellow recruiters and to me about how can we help in this process? How can we educate ourselves to be able to advocate for these veteran resumes that come along that, may have something that isn't there that we would need? What kind of advice would you give to, I know you like giving advice, so this is good. That's a good question. Give advice to my recruiters, to me, about this.
I'm reminded of a workshop I did with recruiters from a very large company, and there were probably 30 to 50 recruiters in the room. And I gave them a really classic military resume, all full of MOS, right? Military occupational specialties. A person off the street would have no idea what this looked like. And I broke them into small groups and I asked them, it gave them about 15, 20 minutes to discuss what they were seeing. And I gave them a fictitious job that they were trying to place for. In those 15 to 20 minutes, working as a group, I was stunned with how much good information they were able to pull out of this resume.
Right.
I mean, really saw parallels, but the overwhelming feedback were two things. First of all, I wouldn't be able to spend 15 or 20 minutes on one resume. Yes. And I don't typically work in a group, right? So if there's ever an opportunity to get a resume that makes no sense because it is 6 pages of military experience, if there is somebody on the team who has a military background, who you could have even a small conversation with to say, tell me what the story is here, right? What is this person trying to tell me? Obviously the person didn't do a good job there, but that doesn't mean the story isn't there. Having somebody in the team who can help navigate that would be fantastic. The other thing is, can you spend maybe a few minutes on that resume and see if you can find threads? Is there a leadership thread? Is there a problem-solving resiliency thread? We know that right now, companies, especially companies like Google, everybody's right-sizing, figuring out, pivoting. These are men and women who've got experience doing that. And whether they worked as, a Java or Python, their experience is there, or it's in, supply chain or distribution. How can they help bring those skills into an organization? Spending a few extra minutes may be worth it to find a right candidate. And then I think third, if it's intriguing, if there's anything intriguing, is it possible to have a quick conversation? You're going to make somebody really excited and nervous knowing that a recruiter from Google just called. But it could also show them that there's opportunities to review their resume differently. And if they haven't had any access to your resume writing workshop or any of the other tools that are available, that could be a wonderful opportunity to give them some guidance. And I know it's asking a lot, but I think they're worth it.
Well, recruiters are good-hearted people and like to help. So that's why I asked that question, because, you know, we are out there trying to get veterans hired. And I'm speaking, of course, not just for Google, but I know recruiters around the world want to do what they can. They want to do their part. So that's great information. I'm going to have to tell Charlene about that too, because, you know, she's been working to educate all of us on learning about veterans. That's great. Okay, so one thing I did really love about your book, let's move on to something else, is first of all, anybody who's now seen us speak for this time can tell how positive you are and that you have an infectious energy. And I would say, and I truly mean this, when I was reading the book, I could hear your voice. It was so authentically you. And you talk a lot about, you know, how you conduct a job. I mean, I really think it's a book for anyone. I mean, of course, it's for veterans. It's for people coming right out of the service. But I really believe it's for people who are engaging in a job search at any time in their career, and also for our veterans who are getting a second or third job. Job searchers are super emotional, right? I mean, there's so much emotion. And I think some people who haven't done that don't realize that it's going to be a very emotional process. But you talk a lot about attitude. Like, how do you feel that an attitude, you spent a lot of time on this in the book. Talk to me a little bit about that and how the advice that you give to folks in a job search about attitude and how it can make a real difference.
Well, and thank you for those kind words. Don't make me cry, honestly.
I love it. No, I'm telling you, Lida, this book, it's you. I mean, it truly is you. It was amazing to read it. So, but anyway, I know I feel like I'm shilling for your book, which I'm not, but I'll hold it again in a minute.
Okay, success.
Okay, but talk about attitude, because I think this is incredibly important. And I think for anyone, we could all learn something.
It is. I mean, it's important if you're a student veteran and you're going to talk to your professor, right? I mean,
right.
Do you bring enthusiasm and passion for the topic, or are you coming to them entitled and with a chip on your shoulder? For an entrepreneur, we know that every time we speak to a prospective new client or talking to investors or our teams, I mean, attitude is everything. I love to use the example that, you know, when you watch Shark Tank and the business valuation of the inventor's business falls apart, the sharks always say, but tell me about you. Why does this matter to you? We know that before somebody will care about what you do, they want to know why you care about what you do. And passion and attitude is huge. Attitude is your altitude, right? It really does matter. And job seekers need to think about this too. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that this isn't just a book for veterans. I've had several people tell me that since the book published at the end of October. And it wasn't written for a general audience, but it is a roadmap to finding a job and choosing a job and staying in a job and knowing when to change jobs. But attitude for a veteran, I think, is a little bit different because they're coming out of a culture and a community where they knew how to do what they were doing. Everyone around them was assigned to the same mission, was aligned with the same values, had raised their hand in the same way they had to commit their life to something that was, you know, so much more important than I'll ever do. And so there was this camaraderie. You know, veterans describe the military as a family, right? They're brothers and sisters in arms. And now you come into a community where people have different agendas and there are no corporate rules that all you have to do is know the rules and then you'll be successful. And everything changes. And I think attitude is very different. I work with very, very senior military officers who sit across the table from a 22-year-old hiring manager who's going to decide if this career path is viable for them. And so their attitude becomes sometimes a challenge. We don't want veterans to feel entitled or arrogant, but they should be entitled to certain things, just like another job seeker would. If you have the skills and the qualifications and the brand to put you in that position, you should have a good conversation. But attitude matters. And if you're coming across angry, one of the things that I shared in the book is a really good friend of mine who runs diversity and inclusion at a very large company, says I can always spot the angry veteran. Right? This is the person who just kind of sits there and expects that we're going to hire them because they served in the military. That's getting really tough today, because not only is your competition the other 200,000 men and women who left the military this year, but it's all the other job applicants who might have more skills and a better attitude. We also know that companies hire for culture. Right. And culture is something, it's very hard to describe. Google has a very specific culture that, you know, you hire a certain breadth of employee. And if somebody doesn't fit that culture, then a recruiter is thinking, I'm going to have a problem if I send this candidate on, because they're going to upset the people in the decision process. And so we want to make sure that our applicants are researching the culture and making sure that that culture aligns with their own values, so they can approach the job interview, if you get that far, showing how you're in alignment, showing that your values, your attitude, your beliefs, your passions, your work style lines up with what that company is hiring for, not just skills on paper.
Let's talk a little bit about research. You just brought that up.
Yeah.
What kind of, I mean, as a recruiter, you can tell a candidate who's done their research at all, or a candidate who is just throwing a resume out at anything. Talk a little bit about the guidance that you give folks who are looking at companies. How do you advise them to start this process of research? And again, this is something that I think is very valuable, not just for finding your first job out of the service, but like anytime you're going into a job search. Talk a little bit about the guidance on research that you give in the book.
Well, first we start with the internet, right? We look at company websites, we look at the company profile on LinkedIn, and we would hope that what the company puts on the website is consistent with how they are. I used to be a marketing person in-house. I wrote that copy, and sometimes it was a little aspirational. Most of the time it was aligned with how we were. And that'll give you sort of an understanding of how they publicly, externally promote themselves and their culture. But I'm a big advocate for informational interviews. I think, especially when COVID happened and everybody sort of hunkered down, I was encouraging all my veterans to do informational interviews about the industry, about the company, about the type of job. And an informational interview is not a job interview, but it's an interview where you reach out to someone who might have that job or work in that industry or at that company. And you say, I would like to do an informational interview. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? And you have a specific set of questions. And what you're doing is you're getting sort of the backstory. What's it like to work there? How did you get a job there? What are some of the things that keep you there? What are some of the challenges? What makes somebody successful in that job? Where do you see your industry going? They're very specific questions. I did that when I started my own business because I'd never started a company before. I did a ton of informational interviews. I didn't care if somebody started a dry cleaners or a franchise. It didn't matter. I wanted to know what I didn't know. And once I had done all these interviews, I could find the data points. And that's what allowed me to feel smart about the choices I was making. And I think aside from what you're going to find online, do those informational interviews. Ask people to give you 15 minutes. And if they don't have time, that's okay. Find these people on LinkedIn. Find them in your network. Odds are you know somebody who works at Google. I know lots of people. And these are people that you could just reach out to but ask really smart questions. This is not a time to sell yourself. If they offer to walk your resume in, that's different. But as the job seeker, your job is to get the information, which is just what you requested. If you bait and switch and you now start pitching yourself or asking for favors, you kind of cross the line. That's the kind of research I would do before ever having a phone interview, video interview, or one day in-person interview.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, you and our viewers. I ask oftentimes, because I like to kind of understand if people have done research. One of my first questions in my initial screen of talking to anyone who's applied is, why Google? Like, why Google? I mean, that is the most open-ended question that I can ask them. And I get a lot of wonderful answers about, mission and aligned with values and products and wonderful things. But 10% of the time will get an answer of, well, who doesn't want to work at Google? Wait, okay.
Or it looks good on a resume for my next job.
Yeah, like you could do a little better than that. Like anything, like literally anything you could have done better on that. So I don't exactly understand why people do that. Okay, I know we're getting closer on time, but there is something else that came up in the book that I wanted to ask you about. How do you think people should start narrowing down the choices? I mean, we talked a little bit about veterans coming out of the service. There's so many choices and they're overwhelming, and you can get yourself caught up in that circle of choice. Mm-hmm. How do you tell people to start narrowing it down? You give some very good advice in the book. So tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, I think there are going to be non-negotiables in your career path, in your transition path, and then there are going to be the nice to haves. So assuming the non-negotiables are checked, for instance, maybe you traveled a lot in the military and your family relocated, as we know, many, many times. And one of your primary goals now is to buy a house and set up roots, and the kids can form, bonds. That kind of a non-negotiable, if some of the jobs require travel that you're uncomfortable with, that would be a reason perhaps to look at a different option. Lifestyle, salary, benefits. And what we talk about in the book is it's not just about paycheck. Some companies offer wonderful benefits that might be really important to your family. But, as you're setting out your career path and you're designing what those, non-negotiables are for you and your family and your career, start looking at those companies. Ultimately, I would find a company where their value and mission aligns with yours. And if one company has a really good salary, but you kind of get a weird feeling about their values, is the money worth it? One of the things you have to do when you build a career is you have to make choices, and those choices have consequences, good or not good. If you see a path forward with one job, but maybe the salary's a little less, or the starting title isn't what you dreamed about, but the path is better, that could be a reason to make that choice. Talk to your family, talk to your support network, make the decision in terms of what's best for your career. I hate when we think about it as a job, because a job is a paycheck. A career is what you get to do to build your desired legacy. And it's something that you feel is important. What I love when I hear from veterans, they say, we're not looking for charity when we leave the military. We're looking for a career that has some meaning and mission, like what we had in the military. And that's what you should have, right? Transition is an ongoing process. It's not one day. It's not the day you have your retirement ceremony, then you have transitioned. I talk to folks who've been out of the military for 5 or 10 years, and they say, I feel like now I'm transitioning. That's so normal. Tricia, you and I transition every time we change jobs, or we change, careers, or we level up. It's an ongoing process.
Right. I hear that from a lot of veterans, and I hear that from some of our VetNet members about how it takes a few years before you actually start to feel comfortable in civilian world and in this kind of life that we have now. So I know we're getting short on time. Is there anything else? Any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience today? And then I will show the book again. Success After Service. Oh, I'm covering the title. But anything else that you want to share with the audience? I mean, I always find our conversations very illuminating, and I'm in the business of hiring people. So what do you think? Anything else out there that you think these job seekers should know or recruiters should know?
I think on both sides, ask for help. Right.
Yes.
In the military, asking for help might be seen differently, but in the civilian world, we know we have to ask for help. We have to lean on others. And there's so many professionals and not prior military professionals who are so anxious to help. And whether we can tell you what our experience has been like, or share resources with you, or connect you to somebody, reach out for help. It's okay. There's no dumb question. And trust me, as a civilian, I asked lots of dumb questions when I first started working with military folks. But really, that's what it's about. And for the recruiters and hiring managers, I would say the same thing. Find somebody that you can ask that question to, who's going to make you feel smart, and keep learning, because awareness is the first step. Knowing what you don't know, getting the information and the resources, leaning on others. That's how we all do it. So somebody coming out of the military, just get on that bandwagon and let us help you build a career outside of the military that has that sense of meaning and fulfillment that you had before. And thank you to those who've worn the uniform and military spouses who've been part of that journey, and the children of military who've lived that lifestyle as well. As an American, I get to enjoy the freedoms and liberties that you fought for. And it is my honor to find this way of serving those who've served.
That is wonderful. That's a great way to end. And I would just say to anybody watching that Lida does have an extensive coaching practice. So if you're a veteran out there and you're looking, you could probably try to find, Lida has a very active LinkedIn profile. So you can see, if you get to follow her, she's always giving tips on job searches. Also, I would recommend Success After Service. I think it's a tremendous book. And I honestly was thrilled when I read it, because it was just, it's so wonderful. It's an emotional time, a job search. And I think even for families, like having a book like this, which is a resource, a real roadmap, is something that is so wonderful. So Lida, thank you so much for all that you do for our veteran community. I love getting to partner with you. I hope we'll see you here at Google again for your next book, which I know you're writing now. So that's great. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciated it. And thank you so much. And to our veterans, happy Veterans Day.
Yes, happy Veterans Day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.